always remember when I did not understand how I used to stand under all the fool's rules running these lands. I had my head in the sand and I was asleep. Now I learn a little more every day, and I'm waking the sheep. Gonna say it out loud, say it proud, get it out, 'cause I'm burning inside, cannot hide it no more. I'm a raconteur too. Yeah, I'm a raconteur too. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. All the people in the chat room singing. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. One more time now. Oh, I'm a raconteur too.
Hello and welcome to Raconteurs Too. I'm your host, Aid Hardy, otherwise known as Captain Cliche, here to remind you that this world belongs to all of us, not just the chosen few. If you're listening to a podcast or you're listening to us on YouTube, you can catch me live on Mondays, 7 till 9 p.m. UK time at raconteursnews.com, where all the previous shows are available as a podcast. If you're listening live, join me in the chat room tonight with any questions or comments. My guest tonight has been on Raconteurs Too before, but with a different subject. Please welcome back to Raconteurs Too, Pippa King. Hi, Pippa.
Hi, thanks for having me back. It's great.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It is a bit disconcerting seeing you sat there with squinty eyes because you've got this glorious sunshine shining on you.
Yeah, it's great. It's nice and warm.
And I know people can't see, but you've also got Barney with you tonight. Barney's the little dog.
Yes.
And I've got a bit of a soft spot, but there you go. Last time you were on, Pippa, we were talking about biometrics in schools. And if anybody's not heard that podcast, certainly one they should have a listen to, because there's some actually quite alarming information in that. Just before we go into the smart cities, would you just tell everybody a little bit about Pippa King and how you kind of got here?
Yeah, thank you. It was not by design or by want. I just sort of fell into these things as you do. Back in 2004, my children were 6 and 7 years old, and they nearly got fingerprinted for a school library system when they were at primary school. And I had spotted the scanner in the school library, and only by coincidence had been on the internet maybe a couple of weeks beforehand and seen an article on fingerprinting children for school libraries. And I remember reading the article and just thinking, that's just outrageous. How can they get away with that? And then I sort of saw the same scanner in my child's school library, and I asked the head teacher when she was going to get my permission, because I wasn't going to give it. And she just said, I don't need your permission to fingerprint your kids, and basically put their fingerprints on a database. And so, to cut a very long story short, that sort of led me on an activism campaigning path against that sort of technology being used in schools, which culminated in a piece of legislation in 2012. It was myself and another group of parents worked with privacy organisations, No to ID, Privacy International, and we basically spent from 2005 onwards lobbying Parliament. Actually, physically, I mean, I'm in the north of England, but I sort of went down to London and we went and sat and talked to MPs and opposition MPs about the technology that was being used in schools, biometric technology, and they were, at the time, sort of certainly before we had highlighted them to the use of this technology with children, because, of course, we weren't using it in adult society at all. It was, there was no biometrics in adult society, not like there is now where you can open your phone with your fingerprint. But 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was nowhere in adult society, but it was being used in schools. And certainly No to ID were under the impression that, as they were fighting the introduction of a biometric national ID card at the time, that this was basically the government softening up the next generation for biometric ID cards. So they were really supportive. And so we had a fairly successful campaign sort of trying to highlight this in various sort of tabloid newspapers and broadsheets, which we got the odd article in. But there was mainly articles that appeared in local newspapers when a local school had introduced technology and the parents had really kicked off about it, because parents did kick off about it. And it was primarily in primary schools at the time. And in primary schools, parents stand around and talk in the school playground. So we were quite active, sort of as a group of parents, sort of locally and nationally. But I think the biometric industry sort of got wise to this, and the technology sort of wasn't used in primary schools so much, sort of about 2 or 3 years after we started campaigning, and they shifted it into high schools where the parents aren't in contact with each other. And it's a cooler technology for older kids. And but anyway, there's a Protection of Freedoms Act that got brought in by the coalition government, which sort of tidied up all the privacy infringements that they thought the Labour government had sort of done in the past 10 years. And in it was a clause on biometrics in schools. So, I mean, in my mind, the technology isn't appropriate to be used in schools at all, because that type of data about a child has to be absolutely secure for the lifetime of that child, apart from the implications of where that biometric fingerprint can go and who can access it and what information is stored against you based on that sort of biometric. So, but it is in schools, and at least the legislation now sort of states that schools have got to inform parents, and that we can refuse it, so can children, and schools have to provide an alternative technology. So that's where we're at, and as far as I know, that's the first legislation globally on a national level that deals with biometrics, which can include fingerprints, iris scans, voice scans, facial recognition. And all those technologies have been used in UK schools over the past 15 years.
All the sort of thing that probably most people listening to this would avoid like the plague in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I think because children are in a compliant situation, and the situation was that parents just simply weren't being told the school was using biometric technology, and certainly primary school children aren't going to go home and say, "Mummy, I'm using a fingerprint system," because they just wouldn't think to question it, because a teacher says, "Put your fingerprint on here," and they're just going to do it. And that was I was so that so annoyed me that decision was being taken by the school about my kids' data, and I wasn't involved in it. And so now parents can be involved in it from any age, sort of up to 18 years old. After the child's 18, they're sort of an adult, then it's up to them whether or not they give over that sort of information. But that's how I sort of fell into sort of looking at sort of general sort of privacy and data protection. And so I had alerts come on my emails for anything fingerprint related or facial recognition. And I sort of fell into sort of looking at what was going on, because there wasn't anything going on particularly with adults technology at the time, but sort of certainly over the past 10 years we have been introduced to biometric technology, sort of like if you open your phone, or I don't know, some computer game consoles use it, but increasingly it's being used in sort of other sectors of our lives that we're not particularly aware of, which is sort of taking me down the route of looking at surveillance in smart cities.
Wow. I didn't mention this last time you were on. Last time, I had an incredibly close friend called Bill Hibbard, who was one of my mentors through the financial services industry. And Bill was incredibly intelligent, unbelievably. He was a top 1% of Mensa, but also incredibly perceptive about people's feelings, and there's very, very few people who get both. You either get incredible intelligence or you're incredibly perceptive towards people, and you're very much a people person. Bill was both, and him and his brother set up an organisation called TPA, TPO, the Parents Organisation, and it literally was just like a fact sheet and a newsletter for parents. Sort of online. Now, sadly, and I miss him every day, Bill sadly died of a brain tumour some years ago now. And if I'd got Bill sat with me today, he and you would just be at this for days and days and days on end, because he was everything about, well, what about the kids? How do the parents fit into this? Never about the school. The school should be a servant to the kids, not the other way around. And I have to say, I know you sort of skirted around, well, didn't skirt around it, mentioned it, the Protection of Freedoms Act. I'm right in saying that you, along with a lot of other activist people, were responsible for actually getting that law changed. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. We were biting at their heels. Oh, well, as soon as I saw the fingerprint scanner in school, the head teacher just said to my face, "I don't need your permission." I just thought, that's wrong. it's wrong. It's really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And I came home that night and I wrote straight to the education secretaries and shadow education secretaries. I just didn't even bother with middlemen. I sent straight to the top and just started from there. I went back to the article that I'd read on the internet and got in touch with the person who'd written that. And she was running a small group called Action on Rights to Children, but she sort of was based in London, where Privacy International are and No2ID were. And it's a very small sort of sector in that respect. So it's maybe less than 10 people that are really active, but they all know each other and keep in touch. And so she sort of said to me, listen, I've had a few parents get in touch, but she was sort of looking at whole other areas as well to do with children. She said, do you want to coordinate or to try and coordinate nationally with parents on this? And I just said, yeah, fine. And so there were a group of maybe 4 or 5 of us really active parents that we used to meet sort of every 3 months in London, meet up with the guys from No2ID and Privacy and Terry. And then we used to go to Portcullis House and sit down and batter, especially the opposition. Well, it was the opposition MPs, because the Labour government at the time wouldn't even meet with us, let alone even reply to an email. They were awful. It was quite scary, actually, and an eye-opener for me, because they were just not being accountable. They had no idea how many schools were using this equipment, how many kids had been fingerprinted. They didn't even know what type of technology was being used in the schools. As far as the Data Protection Act was concerned, if the schools aren't breaking the data protection laws, which they weren't, because biometrics isn't in the 1998 Data Protection Act because it's out of date and technology progresses a lot faster than legislation. So in their eyes, the schools weren't doing anything wrong. And I think from their point of view as well, they probably knew that national ID cards, biometric ID cards weren't going to go through. And this was a very convenient way of maybe just waiting 10 or 20 years before you introduce it again. And you've got a whole generation of children that have been softened to the use of their fingerprints for everyday mundane activities like eating a meal, getting a book out, access to areas. Why would they question it if the government, I mean, they've already given the fingerprints to the government, in effect, to the education system. So why would they worry about giving it out for a national ID card? So, and you can say the then Labour government were very uncommunicative, but the Conservatives and Lib Dems were good. They were good to their word. I mean, they did say if they got in 2010, they would do something about it, and they did, to everybody's utter surprise. Politicians are like, but they did, to be fair. And the legislation is good in the fact that the non-consent always outweighs the consent. So schools have to ask both parents for consent in order to process their children's biometrics. And if one parent consents, the other parent doesn't consent, the non-consent of the parent who doesn't consent overrides the consent. And if both parents consent and the child doesn't consent, well, the child's non-consent overrides the parents. So it's a healthy piece of legislation in that respect. But it does just apply to educational establishments for under 18-year-olds. So if another government department, say social services or police or immigration, wants to take a children's fingerprint, it's all fair game at that point, because this legislation only applies to educational establishments, which I suppose is, as it was at the time, they were the only ones using the technology.
But at a time when children are easily influenced and very much steered down an avenue where the people that are teaching them want them to go.
Yes, and also as well, it's this not questioning. I mean, children are in a very compliant situation in schools, and if they're told to do something, I guess 99% of them do it without questioning it. And really, there's a whole host of issues that, for me, sort of using this technology raises. In sort of, I guess one of them to me was that, the main thing was that the decision-making process for me as a parent had been taken off me with this. Also, as well, my kids were using a technology that I really wasn't familiar with, and neither was the rest of society. So how on earth could I make an informed decision based on the fact that I wasn't using the technology, neither were, the vast majority of the whole of the adult society. And this interesting, because parents that did come online with it initially were 50% of them were from the tech industry, and their concern wasn't really on the privacy basis, but they were concerned about the security of the information and how long that had to be secure for, and how whether it was getting past to police, Interpol, Europol. Because when so biometric is so bio means life and metric means measure. So when you put your child puts a fingerprint on these systems, it's not a fingerprint that's stored as such. The system looks at the whoops and the swirls of the fingerprint and then sort of makes a little map and turns that map into maybe a 40-digit number string, which actually is far easier to transmit from computer to computer than a fingerprint image is.
Of course it is.
So that's so and these Interpol and the police and they do share fingerprint biometrics, and also as well schools can pass biometric information onto the police and security services without telling the child or the parent that it's done so. I haven't found an instance yet where that's happened. I've actually gave a freedom of information out to all 48 police forces at the time in 2013, and 38 of them refused to answer me on citing costs. I think 2 didn't answer, and the remaining 8 just said they didn't know or they hadn't. So I send a freedom of information request out to about 400 schools before Christmas, asking if any of them had passed fingerprint or biometric information onto the police. And one school in Liverpool actually answered back and said, yes, we've passed it on to police and social services. So I thought, great, I've actually got an instance. So I went back to the school and I pressed them further and just said, to be absolutely clear, you're telling me that you've given biometric information to the police and social services. And that the question was specifically, you couldn't not understand it. And they completely backpedaled and said, oh, no, we made a mistake. How can you make a mistake in a freedom of information request? And so, oh, yes, we've given fingerprints to the police. Oops, no, sorry, we haven't. So,
no, the mistake they made was actually confessing to you that they'd done it, not the information that they'd given. Yeah.
But it's just something that if you are a parent or a child and you give your fingerprint to a school database system, it could go to the police and security services. And from there, it could go to Europol or Interpol or possibly the CIA or whatever lettered agencies there are around the world. And you have no control over that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's yours.
Yeah.
But as they will say, if you give up anything, that's up to you and we can share it as we wish. Well, and that seems to be the general attitude, doesn't it?
It does, and also as well, I got so many times, well, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear. And that's not the case, because you can get mistaken identity. You can have false negatives. So you could put your fingerprint on a system and you are on the system and the system says, we don't recognise it. And then you're stuck and maybe you can't have a meal or you can't get a book out of the library. Or you can get false positives. So I could walk up to a fingerprint system in a school, put my fingerprint on, and they would say, oh, yes, you're Jenny Smith or somebody. And those false positive and negative rates are roughly about 1 in every 1,000. So if you've got a secondary school with over 1,000 children, and you've got at least one child either getting a false positive or negative match with their fingerprints. So it's not a precise technology. If you can remember a PIN card, which most children can, obviously it's a 4-digit number, that's not going to create a problem. And the schools will sort of say, oh, kids have problems remembering PIN numbers. Well, crikey, you're teaching them GCSEs and A-levels. How on earth can they be expected to pass an exam if they can't remember 4 digits of the PIN number? It's a rubbish argument. It just doesn't stand up at all.
Yeah, and, it's just not convenient for them, is it?
Well, the schools got sold a solution to a problem that didn't exist. Long lunch lines and delays and payment processes. Well, now they've got a double problem because every school that buys a biometric fingerprint system has also got to have a PIN number or a swipe card alternative. So they're running 2 payment systems side by side. It's bonkers. Why would you do that? Yeah. That's not financially great for the school, is it? Having to spend.
No, it's a great way of spending money.
Yeah.
But then again, it's just like a lot of things in life. These electric speed limit signs. Those matrix ones that come up, it's 30.
Yeah.
Well, for every electronic one of those, they have to have an old metal one next to it.
Right, okay.
It's not a replacement, it's an as well as. And what's the point?
Yeah.
There's always the question, isn't there? Who benefits?
Who benefits? Follow the money. Yeah. Who benefits? Well, the biometrics are being used in UK schools over the past sort of 15 years. They actually got introduced in 2001, so it's been a good 15 years now. And there was nowhere else in the world that was running this technology at all. So basically, the international biometric industry flooded the UK schools market with all the different types of technology that wasn't yet on the market, like facial recognition, iris scanning, infrared palm scanning. And there was a company called Fujitsu that was working in conjunction with Amy, who has the biggest, I think it's a PPP or public PFI contract with Glasgow schools, and for 35 years. And Ame and Fujitsu were working together, and in 2008 they introduced an infrared palm scanner to a primary school, so the kids could have their palms scanned so they could eat lunch. And that technology didn't come on the market commercially for at least another 2 or 3 years, but from Fujitsu. So they basically tested it on UK school children. The same with iris recognition, iris scanning. They had it in a school in the north of England on the northeast coast. And it was absolutely rubbish. It was slow technology. It didn't work very well, but the company got some good results from it as a proof of concept, because they had all these thousands of kids using it. I mean, you couldn't make this up, and it was just jaw-dropping. The technology that was being used to fingerprint my children was a technology from a company called Antion, via Digital Persona, a company called Digital Persona, that was being used in Guantanamo Bay, or had been used in Guantanamo Bay, and obviously superseded by whatever other biometric technology. And so, kids' library systems got the dud one, or the out-of-date one.
So all of this then sort of brought you to police surveillance, CCTV, police state. I mean, I guess you're like me, that when you go to the airport, they can stick their scanner where the sun don't shine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sort of brought you to all of that sort of stuff.
Well, like I said, I had alerts on my phone because I was interested in what the biometric industry was up to. At the time, there was very few alerts, maybe 10 years ago, that were coming through, because it was an emerging industry. I mean, now I can get 30, 40 emails a day because it's just so prevalent around the world. But things like for facial scanning, iris scanning, infrared palm scanning. So I could see what was happening in relation to what was happening in UK schools. Because we as a population weren't experiencing biometric technology particularly. But then that started to change maybe about 2011, 2012, and I began to sort of see in the States they were sort of starting to use facial recognition technology behind CCTV. Now, they'd had some facial recognition technology in schools in Gloucester, I think, in 2010, and it really just wasn't working properly. So, and out of all the biometric technologies that there are around, I think that was the one that at the time sort of flagged up alarm bells to me, because if you want to interact with a biometric machine for iris scanning or infrared palm scanning or fingerprinting, you have to physically make a decision. I'm going to walk up to this machine and I'm going to give it my information. And
Yes.
Yeah. With facial recognition, you have no consent, because it can be running behind whatever CCTV or IP, Internet Protocol television camera or security camera, and you wouldn't necessarily know that it's scanning you. So that was the one, and when I could see that various police forces in the United States were sort of looking at it, it was just a matter of time before it came over here, and so that's what sort of got me interested in smart cities, because the first smart city we had in the UK was Glasgow. 2013, it won a £24 million bid from the government. And it has sensors on lampposts, sound sensors on lampposts. It has air quality sensors. It's got a huge traffic sort of network of cameras. But it also upgraded all their public space CCTV to HD, high definition. And behind that, they bought a system from a company called NICE, N-I-C-E Systems, an Israeli security system, and they bought something called Suspect Search, which is basically a piece of software that scans crowds for people's faces, the way that they walk, what they're wearing. It can determine footfall on marches or demonstrations or any public events, and it can track a particular person of interest right across the city from camera to camera. And they call that particular type of technology facial or body detection technology, because it's not actually running it's not a facial recognition. It's not recognising you as Pippa King or whoever, because there's no database or photographs for it to reference to. So at the moment, the system they bought can only flag a person of interest, or you can type in an avatar of a missing person, and the CCTV camera network, or really it's IP, it's Internet Protocol, wireless network will switch into action and go and do its thing and go and try and find that person and see if they can track them across the city. Now, I've been at Glasgow City Council since 2014 with freedom of information requests, wanting to know when it's being turned on, because as far as I know, there's no system like this operating at all in the UK or even Europe. And I was really interested to see the privacy impact assessment. So for every, so the privacy impact assessment comes under our Data Protection Act. And when you introduce a new type of technology or you're running a new system, you should really, under the Data Protection Act, carry out a privacy impact assessment to check if it is going to impact on people's private rights. And it seems, because the last freedom of information request I sent to them came back in May and said, and they still hadn't, after 4 years of having the system, switched it on yet. All the cameras in the system is ready to go, but they just haven't made it live yet. And I keep asking them for the privacy impact assessment, and they keep telling me it's not quite finished yet. And what I think is they've gone and bought a system that actually is incompatible with our Data Protection Act, and they probably can't switch it on, or they're desperately trying to find a way to switch it on without breaking the Data Protection Act. They, in the last freedom of information request, they told me that they should have the privacy impact assessment done by, just a minute, I'll put it just in front of me here. They'll have it done by the 8th of, it's going to be done week commencing the 31st of July. So by the end of July, hopefully, they'll have everything signed off. Well, not hopefully, because I don't particularly want to see that system up and running.
No.
But from their point of view. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they stall it again. I don't think they're able to, or they're having problems with that, which is no bad thing.
Something you said a while ago, and it's one of my hate sayings, when people say, "Oh, well, if you've got nothing to hide, what have you got to be scared of?" And I know what my normal response to that is, but if I was being devil's advocate saying that to you people, what would you say?
I'd ask them why they're wearing clothes.
That's exactly what mine is.
Why on earth are you wearing? Why did we put things in envelopes? Do you close your curtains at night?
Yeah.
If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. What's your problem? And I think I had a lot of this when we were doing the campaigning, and also sort of me looking at surveillance, is that every human being has got a different level of privacy, and I think as a society we have to respect that. And we are in great danger of silently giving away our rights and privacy without sort of knowing about it, because to all intents and purposes in Glasgow, if you walk around, I've been up there and I've given a talk on the smart city up there, the street furniture looks exactly the same. What you might notice is that cameras, rather than being maybe 15, 20 foot high, are coming down to about 8 foot high, just slightly out of reach of a human being. But they're coming down because this facial detection technology is no use to anybody if you're looking at the back of somebody's head. What you want to be doing is your faces.
Yeah. So
the cameras are coming down, and anybody, even if you walk around your town centre or go to a train station, you can see they are far lower than they used to be even 10 years ago. And this is one of the reasons why. It's because they're looking at West Midlands. We're looking at putting something called Face in the Crowd behind their CCTV, purely to find people that had wandered off with dementia and missing kids, obviously.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, that's got to be the only reason, hasn't it?
Yeah. In the end, they didn't end up putting it in, but that's as far as I know, of sort of just over a year ago. Whether or not they've gone on with anything like that, but so yeah, that's all sort of, because Birmingham's another smart city, so it's.
So how many smart cities are there?
Well, in the UK, there's various different projects. There's a project coming out of the EU, which is they've put 70 billion euros into, which is a EU-wide project called Horizons 2020. And there's various parts of smart city projects in different areas of the UK that have got money from the EU. There's also money that comes in from what used to be the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, which isn't that now, and I forget the department's changed. But that's sort of being filtered down through different researches that are done by research councils, which are part of that department, and a government organisation called Innovate, and Future Cities.
That's a good old NLP word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Innovate, yeah.
There's Future Cities, there's a Smart Cities UK, there's lots of different bits of the same umbrella, really, that makes it look very scattered. And when you're doing research on it, it's quite difficult to actually sort of think, oh, is that part of that, or is that? And I think it's probably like that for a reason.
Yeah, I'm going to say that they make it very difficult for us to join the dots, so that even if we are a lot less than stupid, even for people who are aware of what's going on, it just makes it more and more difficult to know what questions to ask and of who.
Well, this is it as well, because they're not these bodies aren't always open to public scrutiny, dependent on whether they're being funded by government or part funded by government, or whether they're arm's length organisations, or whether they're LLPs, which is something liability organisations, and so limited liability. That's it. Programs. So, and then they hide behind, we can't give you this because we're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So you can't particularly find out what's going on. It's not a transparent process. I mean, I have with Glasgow, it's Glasgow City Council, and they have been transparent as much as they can be about what's going on with their project. But the EU is not subject to freedom of information. So, I'm not familiar with sort of that side of things particularly, but the websites are some of them are quite forthcoming, really, because of course with it being new technology and emerging technology, there's a whole new market out there for this stuff. So they tend to be quite candid with what the technology can do, whether or not technology can do that, but they're very sort of good at sort of advertising what they're doing. So part of the smart projects that we have running in the UK, were London, obviously, Manchester, Bristol, Glasgow, Milton Keynes, Birmingham, Bradford, Oxford, and there was one in Hampshire that actually sort of staggered me a little bit, because so basically a smart city is a connected city. So there's wireless sensors, Wi-Fi available in as many public places as possible, and so that it can be better at traffic management, managing air pollution, looking at energy consumption in council offices, public buildings and social housing. This is what was going on in Glasgow, water consumption. And also as well, they like try and get the citizens involved by sort of saying, oh, if you've gone to this place, let's log in on this hub so that people can see where different community groups are, or what cafes are popular and that sort of thing. In London, gosh, they've got something called, it's called Chromaroma. And so they're trying to, it's like an app on your phone. They're trying to encourage people to use their Oyster card as much as they can to sort of build up points at every station they come in and out of, and beat other people at gaining points. And then if you get off a tube train a little bit earlier and do some walking rather than using public transport or the tube, you get more points. And all it is basically a tracking device.
It's a Pokemon with a tracker.
Of course it is, yeah. But they're trying to make it cool and groovy and sort of, and there was another project, I think it was in Bristol, it was called Hello Lamppost. It's just, I just couldn't make this. So with these lampposts and post boxes and different sort of street bits of furniture had little stickers on them saying, text me. So people would stop and text this lamppost. I mean, can you imagine standing in front of a lamppost and texting it? And then the lamppost would text you back with like, if you're right, there's a castle there. But yeah, it's just another way of saying to the city council or whoever it is that's running the smart city, I'm here at this point in time, doing whatever I'm doing, and I'm allowing you to log my activity. I mean, most of the smart city projects are all about running open data sets. So they're looking at traffic management information, smart parking, what's available in cities where you can park. Like I say, sort of cafes in hubs. And there was one project, where was it? I think it was, just having a look, there's a big list of them all here. Yes, I think it was in London. Let me just check that. Right, I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll let you know whereabouts that's being done. It's been done. So basically, one of the Smart City projects is teaching children how to use data sets, because these massive sets of data are pretty meaningless unless you know how to analyse them. And in most cases, the analysing is done by a computer with artificial intelligence on algorithms, and it will probably spit up what you want to ask it. But it's using these data sets for good information. That's this project in schools that's going on. If you just bear with me a minute, I'll let you know. Data sets. Oh, this is it. It's in Milton Keynes. It's called Urban Data School.
Urban Data
Schools. That's the project.
Mm-hmm.
Encourages kids to utilise smart city data sets. And there's the Milton Keynes City Council is behind it, and also a company called Phronses that seem to be some sort of data processing company. And so what they're doing is basically testing the data sets with children in schools to see if they can manipulate it and get what they want. Again, it's with children in schools. It seems like this unpaid workforce for new technology. Because who else is going to sit down and try and data crunch stuff without saying, oh, actually, I need some money for this? Whereas you can sort of build it into a school's maybe IT curriculum, saying, oh, we're doing a smart city project, we're processing this data, and it's not. They are just trials of how they can process the data. They make no sort of bones about that on the website. So there's all this huge amount of data out there, and again, that's what the Smart Cities project is for. And quite a lot of it is open source, so I could access it. But why would I want to access it? I mean, there was one project in Glasgow where they had sensors in the bathroom of people in social housing, so they could actually tell how full up their bath was, how much water they'd got in their bath. Now, apart from that being a useless piece of data, I would be that's nobody else's business but mine, how much water I put in my bath, and I'm quite happy to pay for any amount of water I put in my bath. Do you know what I mean? But it's also telling them what time of day you're having a bath.
How many times a week you have a bath?
That's it. There's a lot more information other than just collecting the data about water. It's it's quite staggering the sort of data that they're collecting. There's various. And there was one. I was going to go to the one in Hampshire because I was looking at Hampshire, and they have a smart city project going on there. And looking at it, it's not actually a smart city project. The government paid out £226 million for PFI company to place 250,000 bollards, street lights and lighted signs to Hampshire and West Sussex and Southampton areas. And so what's happened here is they've made every single lamppost and bollard wireless. So they've all got sensors on them. So they can control remotely how much energy they use to light them, or if it's, and but what they're doing what this particular company is, it's called Mayflower, wirelesslogic.co.uk.com, I think. They're using a type of technology called M2M. So these sensors are M2M, which is called machine to machine. So they're all talking to each other wirelessly. Now, if you look at the Internet of Things, which is a sort of phrase coined by everything being connected to your, having a little radio frequency chip in your carton of milk, and your fridge can tell when it's empty, or and that goes straight to your Tesco's account, and automatically your milk gets sort of reordered, that sort of concept. Well, in order for the Internet of Things to work, you need thousands or millions of sensors.
Yes. And
of course, this machine-to-machine sensor technology is almost it's like the plumbing beneath the Internet of Things. It's not the Internet of Things, because the Internet of Things doesn't exist at the moment, but that's the type of network that's going to be used for the Internet of Things to track us, to track our cars, our objects, and what better way than to put it in every single street lamp or bollard, because those are the arterial routes that we use to travel around the cities. So there's 250,000 of these sensors that's just been put down in Hampshire, West Sussex and Southampton that probably nobody even knows about, because for intents and purposes, all we're seeing is a new streetlight go up. In actual fact, you've got the whole sort of infrastructure there for the next step of digital monitoring.
Well, they've just been doing all of that in Sheffield and the surrounding areas. It's a bit strange where I live because I'm technically in northeast Derbyshire. I've got a Sheffield postcode, and about a quarter of a mile away is the border with North Nottinghamshire. So I'm sort of right on the corner of 3 counties. But certainly where I live in northeast Derbyshire, and I know from when I've been working in and around Sheffield, all of the street lamps, I would say 90% of them now, have all been replaced with these LED ones. And a lot of them have got a little tiny aerial on top.
Yep. If they look for the aerial and look for a small grey box around about twice the size or 3 times the size of a cigarette packet, those are the sensor boxes. But yes, little aerials on top. That doesn't surprise me at all.
That reminds me, I must buy a catapult.
Yeah. We'll just make sure you're not on CCTV.
Yeah, I don't care.
When the cameras are first.
I'm past caring. I'm probably officially a domestic terrorist or whatever by now, whatever. I don't care, whatever. But of course, all this is being brought in, and no doubt and I hate the word authority because however does a servant become an authority? But there you go. The organisations, the councils, etc., that are and the government that are instigating all of this, their whole thing to the public would be, oh, well, it's really good, it's smart, and anything with smart is obviously really good for you because you can connect your phone for free when you're sat outside Mary's Cafe having a cup of tea with your friends, and you can check your Google account. But of course, that won't trace you around the internet either, will it?
No, I mean, it's been sold on, especially the green agenda. We've got to make this green. And there's some startling figures. I reckon by the year 2050, 2/3 of people on the planet will be living in cities. And that each week, over 1 million people get added to cities globally a week. So there's a huge...
Say that again?
Apparently, over each week, and this is from The Guardian, over 1 million people globally end up moving to cities from the countryside.
Wow.
So they're reckoning between 2000 and 2020, which is why the EU have called it Horizon 220 or 2020. Is they think that from the year 2000 to the year 2020, the worldwide city population will double in that time.
Mind you, when I saw that Greater Manchester all of a sudden expanded about tenfold by the landmass it was then to cover, I thought there was something really underhand about that, because all these people who living in Lancashire were all of a sudden living in Greater Manchester. So they were automatically then involved in Manchester as city.
Yes.
So they'd not moved a foot. Their house was still where it was, their address hasn't changed, but all of a sudden they now live within a city boundary.
Well, that's interesting. So maybe it's not a migration as such, but it's a reclassification of what a city is. Yeah. In order for these sort of, well, for me, it's a surveillance grid, really, to come down. You can dress it up and say it's going to make us safer or greener, but it is just a way of monitoring human activity, looking at business activity. I mean, looking at air quality and water consumption. I suppose if you have got, over 2/3 of the world's population living in cities by the year 2050, the cities are going to have to accommodate that. And I can sort of understand that, but at the same point in time, like you say, what constitutes a city? If the city boundaries are to expand, does that?
But if that's been reclassified, could that be then a way of the cities or the governments going to these companies and saying, look, this is how many people you can influence, how much money are you going to give us to install all of your technology? Yeah. I mean, and rather than the other way around.
Absolutely. There seems to be an awful lot of money and a huge amount of interest in smart cities. And the Internet of Things is basically where everything and everyone, it will have a tiny little microchip. If I talked about this sort of 10 or 15 years ago, people would have thought I was batty. But this is what the RFID, radio frequency identification industry, and the wireless industry are talking about. So, and so looking at Hampshire and West Sussex and Southampton, looking at the mesh system, the wireless system they've just installed there with 250,000 sensors, It's happening, and it's happening in Glasgow, and it's happening in Birmingham. Anything that's censored or Wi-Fi'd up is ready for the Internet of Things. And in Bristol,
if there's a sensor, and you've got a mobile phone that's essentially a tracker, but a mobile phone, you could probably get, if you've got a GPS switched off, it could probably get you, within a quarter of a mile by, what towers you're pinging off or whatever the phrase is. But if you just happen to walk past one of those little lampposts with a sensor in it, even though you've got your GPS turned off and everything, they know exactly where you are.
Well, yeah, they do. And I mean, I forget to do this as much as anybody else, but what you should do when you leave the house is turn all your Wi-Fi settings off. Do not make your phone available to Wi-Fi. Because, pardon me, as soon as you walk into any area with a sensor like that, it can see the phone, and it knows, well, it doesn't know that you're with it, but it knows that the phone's there. The likelihood it is going to be you that's with it. I mean, big supermarkets and big shopping centres have these Wi-Fi hubs all over them, so they can tell who's dribbling in and out of the doors, which shops they're going into, which aisles they're in, how long they're spending in different aisles. And you are completely oblivious of this. Okay, so you're anonymous to a certain extent because they don't know it's you that's doing that, but all that data is completely invaluable to them to know what the sort of footfall is around these places. And then you've only got, on top of that, you've got it's called Amtrak, not Amtrak. Yes, I think it's just called Amtrak. So Tesco's made the decision a couple of years ago to put near their tills a television screen, one of Alan Sugar's companies. And so basically that television screen advertises at you. But what it does is it looks at you and assesses, well, okay, so Pippa's obviously sort of middle-aged, white, female. I think we'll advertise this at her. So it'll quickly analyse me and give me what it thinks I'm going to buy. And there's no camera as such with that. It's a television screen that actually looks at this and acts as the camera at the same point in time, showing you what it needs to show you. Wow. So you've got, and this is happening in London in shopping centres. So it is a little bit like the Minority Report, where they're not identifying you as a person, much like it does in Minority Report, the film, but they're certainly analysing you as a human being and as a potential consumer, and giving you what it thinks you want to see. So, and all this is going on partly because you've got your phone turned on, but partly because they're using this facial detection. So, and you have no right of not, other than not going into a shopping centre, there's no way you could not participate in that, because the system just does it anyway. And it's not telling you that there's facial tracking or facial detection on. I mean, when CCTV cameras came in, it got written into the Data Protection Act that you had to have CCTV signage saying there were cameras around. And it's obviously, sometimes it's yellow, but they have to by law let you know you're being filmed. Whoever enforces that, I don't know. And I would suspect now there's that many CCTV cameras or IPTV cameras or surveillance cameras, as we should call them, that you just can't possibly see the signage or put the signage up to say there's a camera in operation. What I'd really like to see is when you're going into these places, for it to say, okay, so you're going to be facially detected in this area, you're going to get advertised at. If you choose not to do this, what's your option? There is no option. You just have to make the decision not to go into that particular shopping centre or that particular part of town, which is called now corporate space. It's not public. Well, they called it public space, but it's not. It's corporate space.
That's quite an interesting phrase, corporate space.
Yes. I'm not a big expert on that, but I have seen there's a great blogger called Sam Williamson. Sam the blogger, he's known as. He does vlogs around London, and he's been asked on a number of occasions either not to stand there because it's corporate space. When actual fact, it looks like just a pavement, but it doesn't. It belongs to a corporation. It's not part of public space anymore, and he's not allowed to film. And I would say that's not my area of expertise, but things visually sort of look the same, but actually aren't the same in many cities that we're, things changing.
One thing that's just sprung to mind, there's a company called Clear Channel, and I stand to be corrected on this, but every single, the illuminated billboards that you see, so they used to scroll because they used to have like two adverts on them. One of the is like a scroll. So in the morning it would advertise, I don't know, breakfast at McDonald's, And in the evenings, it would flip over and it might advertise, I don't know, a restaurant around the corner that was doing bistro meals or whatever. Well, Clear Channel were, I know, one of the first companies to put in the screens that were advertising boards. And they're all over. If you see a screen in a shopping centre, there's a pretty good chance on the bottom the name of the company will be Clear Channel. They also own and run, again, I stand to be corrected, but if they don't, they did run the Sheffield Arena. Whether or not they have anything to do with any of the others, the Glasgow or the Manchester Arena or the one in Birmingham, I don't know. But they were, and apparently they were an absolutely huge company. So, there's all sorts of stuff going on out there. Again, I just come back to the same two things. Who benefits? So they've got all this information. Pippa, who does benefit? Who do you think benefits?
I think there's so much data out there at the moment that I don't think they quite know what to do with it. Like the Horizons 2020 or Innovate or the Future Cities project in the UK. I think they've just got the information. Quite what they're going to do with it, it can't possibly be processed by human beings. So it's going to be processed by artificial intelligence and algorithms. What it's going to be processed for, I could only think that if 2/3 of the world's population are going to be within city boundaries, then it would be to manage a city and manage the people within a city, manage them to a point where they're not going to, they're going to be quiet, so they're going to be calm, they're going to be in a situation that's not going to get them riled. So you've got maybe good traffic management plans, you've got smart this, smart that, but also as well, at the same point in time, you can start to predict behaviour. You can start to predict what populations are going to do. You have this sort of future sort of capacity of maybe if there's an event on at this point in time, because of all this data we've gathered from events that's happened in the past, we can say with a certain amount of certainty that this is how this crowd of people is going to behave. At the moment, this sort of tracking technology or facial detection technology is in its infancy, because certainly in Europe it's not being used. I know it's being used in some cities in the Far East, but every single second that technology is on, it's learning. So even though it's immature at the moment, actually we probably don't think it is immature, but if we look at it again in 10 years' time, and the capabilities of how it could control people's movements within cities, possibly influencing them by whatever sort of subliminal signage or advertising, you start to get into, I personally, for me, that's not a sort of environment that I would want to live in, or I would want my kids to live in, because I think it's healthy to be able to protest and not agree with everything. I mean, I did that. I didn't agree with the fingerprinting in schools, and I was lucky enough and to be around some really good people that helped me and other parents do something about it. But it took 8 years. It took me a long time, and I think, but that was because I wanted it to be. I didn't want my kids to grow up in a society where they were going to be tracked and monitors. And unless you sort of do some digging on the internet and ask, see what's going on, these things are not obvious to us. There's no signage saying you're now entering a smart city, and isn't it great we can track you from, right across the city? Or nobody's going to say that to you, because people just think, God, that's awful, But this is what's running. And it was really interesting. I in 1984, I was at high school, and we read 1984 as a class.
I was just going to say, yeah, was that a slip of the tongue, or was that on purpose?
No. We actually, the class in 1984 read 1984. I think I was probably about 12 or 13 at the time, and I just thought, I think it was last year or the summer before last, I thought I'll go and revisit that book and read it with a fresh set of eyes. Oh my goodness, that and Brave New World. I read them both that summer, and it was frightening, and I would recommend anybody to go back and read those books again.
Do you know the one that got me, that really springs to mind, and I know Andy Young's producing for us tonight. Andy watched this film a few weeks ago, and it's one that I'd seen in the past. The Roddy Piper film, They Live.
Is that the one where he has the glasses?
That's right, and when he sort of looks at a sign, it it actually says what the subliminal message to that sign is. And I think that really is where the smart city is going. But it's not subliminal anymore. It's, it's getting to the point of, oh, look, we've got Aid Hardy stood in front of this screen. Let's advertise motorbike parts to him.
Yes, and as far as I know, subliminal messaging is illegal, certainly in this country. But you could nudge people. The government have got their own nudge departments.
Of course they have, yes. And it's even called the nudge department, isn't it?
If I was running the country, Darren Brown would be my PA. Do you know what I mean? and there are absolutely, without question, there are people with those sort of skills working for government and different sort of maybe hidden lettered agency departments. I don't know. Why would you not? I mean, I know one of my friends is an astrologer, and he gets asked by the particular city that I'm in to what's a good date for an election, a city election. They still use all means necessary to try and influence outcomes. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if there wasn't some sort of not subliminal but subconscious messaging behind these sort of billboards and advertising. And certainly, sort of going on to a complete other topic, but again, which influences us, is the matter of us being in a city that's just full of frequency and electrosmog.
Yes.
We've got the 3G network, the 4G network, we've got the emergency
5G network.
Well, 5G is not yet in this country. I think the licenses are going up for tender this year, but Bristol they're one of the cities that's going to test 5G. And so at the moment, 4G and 3G technology is around about 2.6 to 3 gigahertz. Mm-hmm. The 5G technology is way up the spectrum. Anything over 24 gigahertz is basically going to be 5G, and Ofcom think will probably settle in this country with using a 26 gigahertz. So this is 10 times more of an intense frequency. The thing with 5G network, and with all actually radio frequency or wireless networks, is the very much smaller the wave, or the hertz. So hertz is 1 cycle per second. So a gigahertz is 1,000. So we've got 24,000 hertz, I guess. I think I might have been saying that, but anyway, anybody can look that up on the internet. But the smaller the wireless wave, the less of a distance it can travel.
That's correct.
So yeah, and also as well, it's more difficult to penetrate buildings.
Yes.
So that's why for 5G network you need 500,000 sensors built in lampposts, because they can all bounce off each other a lot easier than a 3G or 4G network can with a longer radio wave.
Yep.
So, and they have absolutely no idea what sort of health effects mentally, physically it's going to have on any living creature, let alone ourselves, insects, bees, birds. There's been Max Egan recently did a good, hour on 5G on his Crow House podcast over the past 2 weeks that I would recommend anybody go and listen to, because he goes into quite a bit of detail with that. And but I say it's not yet in the UK, and the people of Bristol will be the first ones to experience that through their smart city agenda. And again, that's going on lampposts, 1,500 lampposts that are going to be programmable with 5G network.
Yeah, coming to a lamppost near you.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought it that a lamppost would be the thing that's watching you?
Well, it's we were talking about processing power earlier on and all the data that's being collected. There's a project, I don't know if I touched upon this last time when we spoke. Did I talk about sequester and radio physics solutions?
Oh, probably.
Well, I'll mention it again because it's really pertinent to all this sort of technology. So there's a company called Sequester, SEEQUESTOR, and it claims to hook up all CCTV, all security cameras, and make them into one format. So basically, you've got one massive network that can talk to each other of private security cameras and public space CCTV. So at the moment, public space CCTV in the UK is probably less than 10% of the cameras we see. Most of the cameras that we see are corporate cameras or private surveillance cameras. So this company, Sequester, wants to basically hook up all these cameras into one huge network so they can all talk to each other by making the format the same. So it approached the Met Police and British Transport Police and said, can we do some trials with you? And they both said yes. So as soon as I saw this information, I sent British Transport Police and the Met Police a freedom of information request to say, how are you going with this trial? Is it in real time or is it in retrospective time? So as far as Sequester was sort of saying at the time, what they could only do is gather footage together, put it in a big lump, make it all smart, and then they could do things like facial detection, predict crowd footfall, identify packages that had been left, that sort of thing. But what they're wanting to do, or what they're hoping to do, and I don't know whether they've already done it, is actually use it in a real-time scenario. So all these hundreds of thousands, let's say thousands, of CCTV cameras can all talk to each other in a real-time scenario. So I did ask the Met Police where they were up to with this and where, if the trials had happened, and they sent me a reply back to my freedom of information requests and refused to answer, citing national security. So this system is being tested in London. Now, Sequester last October, they're a startup company, they've only been around for a couple of years, decided to have an official sort of company launch in London where they were based. And I have a friend who works for the Register, which is an online techie magazine, really great online source of information for technical things. And some of these journalists got invited to go to the event. And me and him had sort of been keeping in touch with facial recognition technology behind CCTV and how the police were using it. Because Leicestershire police are using facial recognition technology. There's a couple of police forces that are. And less than 24 hours before the opening launch of the event, he got de-invited. Sequester got in touch with him and said, oh, you're not allowed to come anymore. And he was like, why? I've had this invite for months. He's all singing and dancing, sort of, we can do this, we can do that sort of launch. And it turned out that the Home Office, because they were using this new equipment, decided that they didn't want anybody to know exactly what the capabilities of this company were, whether or not it could be used in real time or not. And so we're all none the wiser about this technology. Now, Sequester are owned by a sort of investment company called Anglo Scientific. So Anglo Scientific invest in sort of startup companies and then market it, and so they can get investors sort of investing money in it. So another company that Anglo Scientific invested in was a company called Radiophysics Solutions. Now, Radiophysics Solutions have a technology which is basically millimeter microwave technology. Yeah. So they have a product that is used very much like the TSA scanners in the airports in the United States, whereby if you walk past these scanners in the States, it will pick up whether or not you're hiding a gun or a knife, but it also shows quite revealing details about your physicality.
So we're not talking about a scanner in an airport. We're talking about a scanner.
Actually, so what Radiophysics Solutions have, and you can go to their website and have a look at Sequester's website and Radiophysics Solutions website. So Radiophysics Solutions have a scanner that's about the size of a really large dinner plate. And so rather than you having to make a decision to walk through a portal or a doorway and get scanned by this millimeter microwave technology, these scanners are designed for use on the streets. And this is what Manchester Metropolitan University say. They developed this about 10 years ago. Radiophysics Solutions owns the intellectual property on it, and they've now marketed it and sort of said, look, you can, if you've got a crowd of people, if you point one of these scanners at it, the scanner can identify people that are possibly wearing suicide vests, knives, guns. What the technology doesn't do is give a physical outline of the person and show what's underneath. It would just say, this person is a person of interest. The scanner technology has alerted the fact that underneath their clothing, they have a gun-shaped object. So with Radiophysics Solutions and Sequester, both being owned by the same investment company, Anglo Scientific, they're in partnership with each other. So what Sequester and Radiophysics Solutions have done is they've gone to the Met Police and the Home Office and said, look, not only can we give you a 100% CCTV camera connectivity, possibly in real time, because the processing power we've got is homogeneous. We don't know because the journalists weren't allowed to go to the launch, so we don't know quite what it is, but they're working what's called teraflops. I don't know what a teraflop is, but apparently it's a very large processing power. Yeah. So basically what Sequest and Radio Physics Solutions have done is they've gone in tandem to the Met Police and the Home Office and said, look, not only can we give you access to all the cameras, possibly in real time and put facial recognition or detection behind it, but at the same point in time, we can use these scanners, possibly let's put them on lampposts, because we put everything else on lampposts, don't we? Let's put these scanners on lampposts, or we can use them as handheld devices so that security, police can identify persons of interests. The Radio Physics Solutions scanner can say to Sequester's technology, ooh, I've got a person of interest here. Sequester's cameras can then hone in on that person, and you've got this sort of it's
Pippa, just before we go any deeper into this, because there's clearly a lot to talk about.
No bullshit, no censorship, no pain, no death, no race hatred, no greed, need, no owning me, no God, no queen, no fascist regime. No cops, no shops, no war, no poor, no old boys, no house of lords, no destiny, no luck, no fate, no sentiment, no love, no hate, 'cause I'm gonna roll the way I roll. Yeah, I'm gonna roll the way I roll. Here you go, here. One way's up and one way's down. The other way is round and round. If you see me one day, I'll be rolling my way. No ifs, no buts, no maybes, no pastry bait, no apple parade, no sticks, stones, no broken bones, no steak, no banks, no mobile phones, 'cause I'm gonna roll my way. Yeah, I'm gonna roll my way. Fuck the future, fuck the past. Present's here, but it don't last. Be alive until you're gone. Be my friend and sing this song. No bullshit, no censorship, no pain, no death, no race hatred, no greed, need, no owning me, no God, no queen, no fascist regime. I'm gonna roll my way. Yeah, I'm gonna roll my way. Fuck the Pope and fuck the Queen. Fuck Paul, fuck Idi Amin. Yeah, fuck the Nazis, fuck the Jews. Fuck the Muslims and fuck you too. I'm gonna roll my way. Vote for me. It's time you cast your vote in a democracy. Choose a scumbag to run the economy. Well, go ahead. It won't change your reality. You're just selecting a flavor of tyranny. Vote for me. We have only ourselves to blame for this poor crop of obvious liars on TV. You don't really think feasibly we can have forever a 3% growth annually? Vote for me. Don't you think it's odd that we bomb countries claiming democracy will set them free? Then we support slavery in China and send weapons to the Saudi royal family.
Vote for me.
I will tell you things you really like to hear about growth, jobs, and prosperity.
Vote for me.
I'm in possession of the pertinent facts relating to improvements in the economy.
Vote for me.
Want me no error in the war on terror? I'm the best guy for national security.
Vote for me.
Cause I'm a regular guy, I'll look you in the eye while I say hard-working families. Vote for me for a little more tyranny, so the rich can stay free.
Vote for me.
For a planet rid of slavery, to fight war endlessly.
Vote for me.
I'm the guy that gets funded by big business. Try not to laugh when I say we're together and in this. I just think it would be best all round if the rich got richer and the poor mind their own business. We've got a job to do to get back to raping the planet to make money for those who do. Have a lot of money anyway, but could use a bit more.
Welcome back to Raconteurs Too. My guest tonight is Pippa King, who is an absolute font of knowledge on God knows how many freedom of information requests she's done. And she was actually part of the group of people who were responsible for changing the Protection of Freedoms Act, and certainly an activist, but one with a massive conscience. And that's what I like about Pippa. It really does come from her heart. So welcome back to Raconteurs Too, Pippa.
Oh, thanks, Aid.
Just before the break, which we had to take, well, I did, for the sake of my bladder, and it's not the first time I've said that on Raconteurs Too, we were discussing these TSA-type scanners, that's Transport Security and Administration type scanners, that you said were like the size of a dinner plate, that they can literally point into a crowd, which won't give like an outline like in an airport scanner, but it would certainly, through an algorithm, identify somebody who's got a bulge in the back of his trousers that might be a gun, a backpack that might be bulging in a certain way, that might have and of course we've all got to be scared of bombs and guns, because there's one waiting around every corner with every lamppost with a sensor in it, of course, so we all need to be very scared. But the alarming thing for me was when you sort of got into this, this is something that's portable. They can get it out of a bag, plug it in, point it at a crowd, anywhere they want to, anywhere, where there will already be CCTV cameras that are all nationally linked on the same network, these real-time cameras with facial recognition. Now, earlier on I said to you, all this information, this data, why is it being collected? And I guess one answer that I sort of came up with for myself was, at some point soon, it's going to be bloody valuable.
Yeah, I think data is the new gold, water, oil. I really don't think at the moment we've got the processing power, or we fully comprehend what we can do with it. But certainly, within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have figured something out, and it won't be we.
No,
the big organisations like Amy. That are running, these local authorities. Intel are behind some of the smart city projects. You've got the big sort of Cisco systems, and it's these big multinational companies. NEC, which is a company that's a Japanese company, they supplied Leicestershire Police with facial recognition technology to use on their database of custody suites, photographs. And I sent them some freedom of information requests. This was 2-3 years ago now, and to see whether they were using it in real-time scenarios, sort of through CCTV or handheld cameras that the police use. And they said, oh, no, we're not doing anything like that. And then it turned out I'm subscribed to something called the Police Oracle, which is a police magazine that basically shouts off to itself about how fabulous the police are and what they can do. And in this magazine was an article that Leicestershire Police were going to run this live facial recognition technology at the Download Festival in 2014, I think it was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you mentioned that last time we were on. Yeah, guinea pigs watching music. Yeah.
No, and they hadn't told anybody they were going to do this, and they'd actually said to me, "Oh no, we can't use it in a real-time scenario." And they because this happened after my freedom of information request. Of course, they probably weren't lying at the time. But, they're not making this public knowledge. And the Met Police also had something running at the Notting Hill Festival at the end of August last year. And I gave them a freedom of information request and said, which system are you using? Because, Leicestershire Police were quite forthcoming with me. And the Met Police just hid under national security. So we're not even going to tell you who's supplying the information. So there's a lot of things going on. And this, like you said, with this millimetre microwave scanner that's now potentially being trialled on the streets of London, that can talk to sequester, who we don't know, because we don't know what their technology is capable of, because it wasn't made public. We got at the Home Office's request, are sort of working together to, it's just mass surveillance tools. And the thing is, with the millimetre microwave scanner, you can get a handheld one or you can get a big one. And if you go to Radio Physics Solutions website, they have a couple of videos of what their scanners can do. But also as well, you just think, well, if they're putting wireless sensors on lampposts, what's to say that they couldn't eventually, maybe a decade down the line or even 5 years down the line, put these scanners onto lampposts that could see inside your car or could actually see inside your house? Because this type of, so a millimetre microwave technology, so this is called, it's ultra wideband. So they're using, again, right up the spectrum, 75 to 110 gigahertz. So these scanners are sending out a splash, a frequency of different sort of radio waves. And so different absorption, you get different absorption levels dependent on the speed of the microwave that's hitting you. So, for example, you can use ultra-wideband these splasher frequencies to do ground penetration radar. The Chinese military use it to look inside buildings to see if there's anybody in there before they then go in. You can basically give an X-ray of a building. It's an X-ray, basically, of a building. So, so these scanners, this is the type of technology that's being used to pick up 3D items on people that are concealed. But within that 75 to 110 gigahertz, we have weaponized radio frequencies, one of which was something that was run by DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in America. And this basically frequency weapon was called the active denial system. And that was working at 95 gigahertz. So within that 75 to obviously 110 gigahertz is this 95 gigahertz range.
Slap bang in the middle, yeah.
Slap bang in the middle. And so what the effects that 95 gigahertz has on a human body when it's just projected as a single frequency is it goes about 0.4 of a millimeter below the skin and basically heats you up. Apparently it's excruciatingly painful. And they use, the DARPA was using it for possible, if you've got a physical fighting army in front of you and you just point the active denial weapon at it, it's going to scatter pretty damn quick because it's apparently really, really painful. You're not able to sort of stand that sort of pain. So I'm not saying that these TSA-style scanners are going to do that to people, but that's certainly within that range of frequency. There are physical effects that can be had on not just human bodies, but obviously any living creature that we don't actually fully understand or comprehend because we've not had that used on us before.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I was just going to say was, what are the long-term effects? And the answer is nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's a bit like 5G. Nobody knows what long-term effects that's going to have. And it's not just on us. It's on unborn babies. It's on insects, which are vital to keep, the health of the wildlife and the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Which feeds us. Bees. Birds migrating. We just have no idea what we're playing with at this point. For what? What, national security? Really?
No.
No, it's not that.
Yeah. It's a bit like, when they say national security, it's a bit like the sign you were saying about CCTV camera. It usually says, for your safety and protection, images are being recorded. It's not for my safety or my protection. It's so that you can gather a load of information about me. Yeah,
but going to sort of long-term effects on us. I mean, our brains are electrical, and I don't have any idea what sort of impact this has on our thought processes. Whether it dumbs us down, like fluoridation of the water supply. It's just,
yeah.
I guess. But I think whatever technologies we probably see coming in, even though they are being sort of tested on us to a certain extent, I think probably in reality that the defence agency projects and different security projects around the world are probably about 20 to 30 years ahead of us. It's just...
Well, I remember taking a large van on the ferry over to Germany with a trade stand for a loudspeaker company. And of course, you know, they scan the vehicle and then they stick their head in the driver's window and they say, "Hello, what have you got in the back?" And my answer was always, "You know exactly what I've got in the back. You just scanned the van."
Yeah.
And this is 15, 20 years ago.
But it's like biometric technology. You know, they introduced fingerprinting in schools in 2001 using old fingerprint technology that had been used in the American military. And this is essentially where it's come from. I mean, the active denial system at 95 gigahertz is American military. The Chinese are using millimeter microwave, ultra wideband for, you know, war purposes. And now it's being brought in to sort of civil society. But there's no transparency with it. I mean, this is one of the things that's really sort of riled me with the biometric stuff is, you know, if you're going to use this technology, at least tell us. You know, it's not even like a fingerprint can cause you any physical harm, but give us the choice. Don't. I mean, some people are quite welcome to walk through TSA scanners and have their fingerprints taken and willingly give up their, you know, facial details or biometric details. I choose not to do that, and I don't want my children to do that whilst I'm or they're young enough for me to make that decision for them. So it's just about having that choice. But also as well, I think there's been no discussion on a sort of community or society level. Is society that fragile that we need this sort of surveillance in, all masked up in some sort of green agenda, which, you know, if, like I said before, if 2/3 of the world population are going to be in cities by 2050, sorry, you are going to need some sort of extensive management system in there for water and energy. But to the point where you're surveilling people, I don't, you know, the surveillance is sort of getting wrapped up in this sort of green and sustainability agenda, which sorry, go on.
No, go on, Pippa, because I'm bursting to ask a question, but I need to let you finish.
Well, I was going to say is being sustainable is completely different than being surveilled. I mean, I do realise that in order to analyse sustainability and greenness, you have to have a certain amount of monitoring to see what energy is being used, but not to the extent that I can see the surveillance technology coming in and it being hidden. That's the thing. If the Home Office was being open with us, surely if we were in a society that was that dangerous, wouldn't we all be saying, "Oh, thank you, thank goodness you've got all this, you know, scanning technology. Thank goodness you're looking at hooking up all the CCTV cameras. Thank goodness you're putting facial detection behind the CCTV."
We're not quite all scared enough yet, because, you know, the BBC haven't done quite a good enough job of making sure that we're all scared enough of, well, all the things that I'm still waiting to get. I'm still waiting to get swine flu, bird flu. I haven't met a terrorist yet that, well, other than me, that I know about. Most of the Asian people and Muslims that I know are great, lovely people.
Do you know, I've got my boys are now teenagers, well, late teenagers, and then we're talking about the terror attacks in London. One of my boys is going off to London to study at university in September, and he said, "Oh, it's awful about the knife attack. It's awful about the, you know, gun attack." And I said, "Do you know what? I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, and that's not terrorism. If you want to know what terrorism like, you go and look at what the IRA were doing way back then. This isn't terrorism." And it just, you know, when I'm thinking they've got this technology to identify potential knives and guns and suicide vests, and then suddenly you get, which is I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, it's awful that people get killed and people get sort of maimed by it, but knives and you know, in today's day and age, if you were going to, well, I'm not going to say what I'd do if I was going to cause a terror attack, but it certainly wouldn't be a knife or a gun like that running around. But that sort of falls into, oh, well, you know, we've had these attacks, but now, look, we've got this technology that stops and identifies these sort of things. When, like I say, from what I can remember of terrorism growing up, that's a very soft form of terrorism in comparison to what has been used.
I've just had a text sent to me, and it's actually a really good point. There's a BBC drama series that finished about 10 years ago called The Bill. they had facial recognition available to them then, because it's in the script and in the drama, yeah. And it's certainly at least 5 years ago when it finished. I mean, if anybody wants to sort of Google it or whatever, then I stand to be corrected. But it certainly finished a few years ago. Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because there does need to be, for me, a certain amount of softening up, which is, sort of going back to the fingerprinting in schools and introducing concepts of such type into fictions. It's best place to hide a truth. It's best.
Of course it is, yeah. And watching things like dramas and that where all this sort of thing are in there.
Yeah, I mean, I still am. I was a massive fan of the X-Files when that was on, and I could sort of see that sort of preparing us for the next few decades ahead. Yeah. And I haven't been back and watched some of the early series, but I bet if I did, I'd be much like sort of rereading 1984, thinking, "Oh my goodness, yes." So we've got,
exactly.
We've got that now, and so it's interesting times. But I would urge anybody who's living in a city or even not living in a city, just to find out what their city is doing on a sort of a wireless level. What sort of hubs they're putting into lampposts, what sort of private finance initiatives they've got with different companies to upgrade their city structure, whether or not they're going smart. Every city probably will go smart at some point. It's just a question of when. And I was just
going to ask you, Pippa. This is what I was bursting to ask. We've got the cities that you mentioned. I wrote some of them down, but you said them that quickly. I probably didn't get
we've got Manchester, London, Bristol, Glasgow, Milton Keynes, Birmingham, Bradford, Oxford, and the Hampshire, West Sussex, Southampton, big streetlight wireless.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can sort of compare it to is the biggest city that I'm close to, which is Sheffield, and I guess for you that would be Hull.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly aware that there are a lot of cameras, certainly. AMPR cameras on top of a stick so that they know which cars are entering and leaving the city. Certainly CCTV in the main places in the city, and like a lot of the places that I go to work, some of the challenging council estates have also got strategically placed CCTV, and that's become something that's normal. Certainly the younger people, sort of 15 to 25, they've never known anything different. Right. Never anything different. So to them, it's perfectly normal. So if you took a city like Sheffield, that I'm sure has got Wi-Fi hotspots and all this sort of stuff going on, how far are places like London, Manchester, Glasgow, Milton Keynes, these smart cities, what sort of gap is there? What, in both time, in other words, if you sort of gave Sheffield this however many millions, billions, trillions or whatever it was that Glasgow got, how long would it actually take for a city to get up to speed with?
Maybe probably about, I'm no expert really, so I don't know if I am. A couple of years maybe, and I think the main thing that smart cities are doing is that it's this connectivity. It's making businesses talk to leisure departments, talking to social housing, talking to doctors' surgeries, talking to it's this sort of, everything is operating as a whole rather than small bits, and it's this collection of data sets and different parts of data looking at other bits of data, and it is all about connectivity, so that they can start to look at the city as a whole, including traffic management, human management, where humans are, street lighting, noise, pollution, the sort of healthcare activities with what's going on at doctor surgeries and moving patients around, the schools involved, school transport. They have Manchester's got this. It's called what's it called in Manchester? Let's have a look. It's called they have this like green corridor which has got the universities in it. It's got enterprise centres. It's got the city centre, and the smart city is looking at all this movement around this sort of group. What they call it, a green corridor. It's basically they're just monitoring the city to see what sort of activities going on there. So I would think the difference between an unsmart city and a smart city is basically this connectivity and all the information being sort of congregated in a big data center hub sort of area. That's what I would. But it wouldn't take very long for a Smith city.
Of course, if it took 3 years to make the first one, it would probably take 2 years to do the second one, 18 months to do the third, and before you know it, you could almost get a little town. I don't know, where can we think of where I was brought up, Scunthorpe. And you could say, oh, it's got so many thousand people living in it, boom, 6 months, done.
Yeah.
You know, quite easily, because as the technology speeds up and they become more familiar with what works, what doesn't work, you know, it's like most of the things that we talk about on Raconteurs. It's always the thin end of the wedge.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well, I mean, we've not sort of discussed this, but we don't just have smart cities, we've got smart motorway systems as well now.
Oh, yeah.
So these cities aren't just sort of standalone cities. They've got information coming into the city about the sort of traffic that's coming in, maybe how many people are in the car. You've got your ANPR system. So smart motorways are sort of motorways that track and monitor the traffic on them. So every 100 meters, you've got, again, it's a wireless sensor. It's emitting 125 kilohertz, and it will monitor the amount of traffic on the road, whether or not they need to open up hard shoulder as another sort of roadway, or whether or not they need to imply a speed limit so we're not going to hit a congestion. But of course, the smart cities, which are Birmingham, Manchester, London, Bristol, you've got these big centres that have got these smart cities, these smart motorways connecting them. So I'm presuming that the smart cities just want to operate on a standalone basis. They'll all either be communicating with each other and looking at, oh, how are you doing this project? We're doing it like this. What about sharing this bit of data? What about, is there a smart country project? I haven't found out whether or not there is, and whether all the data. I was just
going to say that, because this new HS2 as well. I mean, by the time that gets here, it's probably going to take 10 or 20 years. I don't know, but surely there are going to be cameras on them. By that time, probably there'll be facial recognition cameras. In the doorway of these things, there could be one of the dinner plate scanners. Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows, exactly, yeah. And if you were the UK government, or why would you have maybe 10 smart cities in the UK and just think, oh, we'll let them get on with it? You'd be saying, hang on a minute, let's have a smart city centre.
Yeah.
Almost like, whatever is built in whatever desert in the States, where it's at Google Mind or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there's the data that these smart cities are generating is almost unhandleable by us, because we didn't yet know what it's going to be used for. But give it 2 decades, a decade, the processing power and what they will be able to predict, because it is about prediction, will be unbelievable. They're like nothing we can imagine. They'll have, for example, putting my education head back on, we have something called the National Pupil Database, which I did talk about last time. And if anybody wants to know about that, please go and visit a website called Defend Digital Me, which is run by a mum who's exposing the flaws of this 20 million data sets of UK school children. So, for example, they have this National Pupil Database, and they have the databases of higher education, and they also have what they call an all education database, which encompasses adult education, special, all sorts of different things. And so what the Department of Education does is it hooks up with HMRC, the tax revenue, Department of Work and Pensions, and what they do is what they call longitudinal studies. So they can see that a 2-year-old travelling right the way through to being 22, 23, maybe finishing a master's, is then going to go into the workplace and earn X amount of money, is going to benefit the country by this amount, as opposed to somebody who was probably quite ill, or maybe through school and didn't get as many qualifications. They're going to cost us X amount of money. So they're already doing sort of very long-term studies on how the population is going to be in the decades coming, to, I suppose, accommodate for things like healthcare, old age social care, that sort of thing.
Do those two things still exist? Healthcare and social care.
Good question. Yeah. Well, we've just about at the moment, though maybe not in the next decade. But so they're already, and of course the government isn't processing this information because they don't have the capacity to do that. They farm it out to corporations.
Of course they do, yeah.
So you know, the people that are really using the data, okay, the government's using it for what they need to do with it. For example, the company that's running the National Pupil Database is a company called RM Education. So they package up all the data from the schools and gives it back to the government, and the government does what it wants with it. RM Education still hold all that data, and they repackage it up and say to each individual school, well, we've got all the data from your school here. We can give you a prediction program that shows you what each pupil should be gaining at the end of every term for the next 3 years. So they're using it for a commercial purpose. So when data like that, and that's personal, raw data of children, you know, that's really concerning. This is what we talked about last time. But goodness knows what they're going to do with smart city and smart motorway data, because...
I mean, that much information. I'll just give you a tiny example. We all know that you put something into Google. If I put into Google comfy office chair and just had a quick look, never thought anything more about it. Next time I switch on any website, the advertising down the side, and it just follows you around the internet. And a friend of mine said to me, have you tried using DuckDuckGo? And I thought, oh, I've never heard of that. I'll put it on my tablet. So I put it on my tablet, use that to search for something, and half of the internet no longer exists. It's just not there.
Yeah.
And then at that point you realise, my God, is that how much advertising that you're actually exposed to just on a little tablet screen in one go? And it literally is, half of it is gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
I'd heard of DuckDuckGo, and I have used it before in the past, but that's interesting. Yes, I was in the market for a greenhouse a few years ago, and for about 6 months after that, I was pursued around the internet by different DIY companies offering me greenhouse. really frustrating.
Yeah, it does. I'm just looking at the things I've sort of written down, you know, about data being valuable, etc. And certainly money and one of the really interesting things that I'd certainly not thought of is there a central thought behind this? Have they thought that far ahead? Because the big question is, what's the end game? I know what my answer is, but I want to know what Pippa's answer is.
Well, given the EU has invested €70 billion euros in their Horizons 2020 project, there's no way they're giving all that money out to different cities around Europe for them not to know the results of any research that's gone on. Mm-hmm. So certainly on an EU level, I would have thought that they're collecting data, certainly at that level, from the countries that are being funded by that particular project. And the funding that's coming from the UK government is coming from the UK government. Why would they not want to sort of utilise the information as well that's coming in from there?
I've got to ask, is Barney dreaming?
Barney's dreaming. He's just
oh, bless.
So.
For those of you that didn't catch the beginning, Pippa sat with Barney, who's a little Patterdale Terrier, and he's laid on the settee nice and comfy, and the little squeak that you heard, there he is, look, was Barney dreaming. Bless him.
Just try and keep him quiet.
No, don't do that.
So yes, I can presume that it is being collected on a EU and certainly a national. Why would it not? Why would it not be collected? Why would it not? Yeah.
My answer to that question, what is the end game, is one world government.
Yeah, I think certainly currency will probably go in my lifetime. It'll be digital, and that's.
There was actually a report the other day, not that I read or whatever reports, but there was a report the other day that said that now cash is down to about 48% of all transactions, and I was actually surprised at that. I thought it would be less.
Yeah, actually, I thought it would be less too. I mean, certainly, I think it's in Sweden about only 4% of their transactions are cash. That's the digital economy, and with biometric authentication, certainly with stuff you can use on your phones where you have to put your face in front of you to make sure it's you if you want to pay by stuff, or Barclays have got voice recognition with their telephone banking. I can sort of...
As have HSBC, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw something... In fact, I might have put it on my Facebook, and it was an April Fool, and it was about somebody having a digital tattoo transfer sort of put on their hand so they could go and travel on the train. And then I find that actually there is one train system that is planning on putting a little chip so people can travel. And that's soon as, because that's the wireless sensor basically. And then you are hooked. I was going to say about the Internet of Things. I mean, this is where it's going, and it is a one world system with the Internet of Things. But the Internet of Things operates on a physical level, like on a smart city, smart motorway, sort of smart car level.
Yep.
And then you have it in your home, if you choose to have it in your home, where your fridge can talk to your the food that's in your fridge, your central heating can talk to your lights, you can talk to it from your mobile phone from 100 miles away. Those things already exist.
Alexa.
You what? Sorry.
Alexa.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got it on a very, very personal level where people are going around wearing Apple Watches and Fitbits and monitoring their sleep and how often what calories they burn, and how, having it as a pedometer. And of course, you can sort of then see, well, that would make sense for it to be hooked up to your doctor's surgery. The medical industry has already invented, and this was a number of years ago, pills with tiny little disposable RFID radio frequency chips in them, so they can tell when they've been eaten. Which would be great.
What?
Yeah, so the chip can activate or deactivate once it's in the stomach, and it can send a message to whatever device, to the doctor's surgery or to you. If, say, my mum or my grandma was forgetting to take a tablet, so she's taken a tablet. And the biggest concern of the medical industry wasn't what effect is the wireless technology going to have on the body, and how would it affect the gut, is, what are we going to do with all these thousands of chips once people have got rid of them from their body? And how's it going to affect the sewer system? And so all this is already sort of been invented as such, but it's not necessarily in place. But I think looking at what's happened in Hampshire and West Sussex and Southampton with the 250,000 sensors, the infrastructure for the Internet of Things to exist, and it's happening in London as well. They've got a big, it's called... what's it called? Sensing London. And so they've put hundreds of these sensors around the city of London, looking at how people move, how cars move. It's all that's where it's going. And I think you're right. One world government, but certainly a one world system of connectivity. And I guess as a human, you would be in there with your smartphone and under the skin chip, which I think is probably where it's going to go. I mean, people are voluntarily sort of taking that technology now anyway. So,
I mean, my view is if you give somebody the power to switch something on, you also give them the power to switch it off.
Oh, aye, that's for sure. Yeah, and if you become a person that is booking the society, and where could you go? I mean, you couldn't even... You'd have to go into the countryside, but where does the smart grid end?
Yeah, I need to buy another tent, I think. Yeah.
I'm going to
go and live in the woods and toast marshmallows over a campfire, I think.
There was was it Channel 4, Channel 5 ran a series maybe about a year ago called Disappearing. They invited a number of people to disappear themselves.
Right.
So they basically couldn't get trapped. They defied them.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't have a television, so I didn't watch it. But apparently the person who won was so mentally affected by, I think it was her experience, that it affected her so much she couldn't go back and do what she did. Because she had literally ended up living in a bush. Because, the CCTV cameras, she couldn't use her cash cards. She had to be careful about, she couldn't drive anywhere. She couldn't rely on friends because she didn't. And it was a really a difficult thing to do, to sort of get off the grid and not to exist in this society whatsoever. So if it is that difficult now, what's it going to be like if anybody did fancy doing that? I mean, I think you just have to buy a boat and try and sail off into the sunset, wouldn't you? But the boat's probably got a GPS tracker on. And
there was a really good comment by Max Egan the other night, and what he was basically getting at was that our generation, God, that makes me sound old. Our generation have got a mental reference to when this wasn't normal.
Yeah.
But anybody sort of 15, 20... I mean, if you said to a 20-year-old, oh, we didn't used to have mobile phones, they'd say, what? You didn't have a mobile phone? Well, how did you talk to your friends? Well, they actually came round for a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Or, well, we rang each other up, but you got to be careful because we'd got a party line and us and next door shared it. But our generation, we have a reference point in our minds that we remember when this wasn't normal.
Yeah.
But in 20 years' time, when there is nobody left hardly that's got, and we'll just be the oldies who will just stick in the mud, of course, won't we? When there is no reference point, and I think at that point, this technology and this way of life will absolutely run at a marathon speed. And what's taken, not just because of the technology that becomes cheaper, better, if you want to call it better, but not just because of the level and the speed of the technology, but of course because the people will just allow it to happen because it will just be the norm.
Yeah.
So the rate of speed that this thing is catching us up it is getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and it will continue to do that unless we do something about it.
Well, I don't want to sort of end on alone. I don't know if there is anything we can do about it. I mean, I think the one thing that I'm really
I have to say, you've done your bit.
I ain't finished yet.
Well, exactly, and if it wasn't for people like you making us all aware of this, change. Yeah, I mean, you and your friends have changed an act of parliament. Now I wouldn't know where to start.
Neither did we, honestly. And it was just, if I'm honest, it was me and another guy called David Clowther who was great. He was very driven. We were both very driven. Spurred on by Phil Booth, who was then the national coordinator of No to ID, and Terry Doughty. So there was really like less than 5 of us, I suppose. And I'm a musician. I teach piano for a living. I'd never followed legislation through Parliament. I'd never advised a bill committee. I really hadn't ever spoken to an MP before, which was quite daunting. Certainly hadn't used Freedom of Information Act. And I just, I guess Terry and Phil Booth sort of showed me and David what to do. And I just hope, anybody else who's feeling a bit sort of intimidated by using legislation or speaking to MPs or dealing with authorities and questioning authorities, just do it. I don't know, even I suppose you get conditioned, don't you, from being a small child, that you look up to these people, they're right, and you don't question authority because they're there to look after you. They're there to provide the hospitals and the schools and the police force and the army, and of course nobody ever does anything wrong in them. But we've been to war a couple of times. I haven't agreed with that. I've seen the police act appallingly at anti-fracking sites. The government is corrupt. I don't have that respect there that I had maybe sort of 20 years ago. For these.
But have you noticed how everything's now called an authority?
Yeah.
Well, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Because trust me, over me, they don't have any.
Well, yes. So yes, and so I think what I want, and thank you for having me on, because it's talking about this and making people aware of what's going on. I think I said how many people do you get listening, which really doesn't matter to me, because if there's only one person that takes the bit between their teeth and starts questioning their city, council, what are you doing? Where are the sensors? Do you have any health risks on this? Where's the privacy impact assessment? And just start, and then maybe they'll realise that we can't just introduce these things. Actually, people are asking questions. Maybe we should have a discussion. That's it. When, maybe I don't agree with all this technology being used, but if the mass consensus of people decide they want it, then okay, I'll go and live somewhere else. I can do that at the moment. Yeah. I choose not to. I don't want to live in a smart city, but the vast majority of people do. That's fine. That's okay, because they've made that decision. But are they making that decision? No, they're not, because nobody's talking about it. Nobody is telling them that this facial detection, there's millimeter microwave scanners being used on them. There's wireless hubs all over. Who knows that 5G is not in it yet? And who even doesn't know what effect it's got on the body? Do you know what I mean? And it's all these points of discussion that's just not being had. And that's what, I say, going back to biometrics, that's what riled me about that. You use the technology, but tell me about it, for goodness sake. Don't just bring it in. It's wrong.
I think the other thing is as well, it's like with everything. When you look at the pyramid, and like you were saying earlier, that why wouldn't the European, at least the European, if they're putting all this money into these smart cities, why wouldn't they actually want to know exactly what was going on, what data was there, what they could do with it, and what the end game was? But the guy who, I don't know, changes the light bulb in the lamppost outside my house, puts the little bit of electronics on the top and asks no questions, all he's doing is earning his living. He only knows his little bit of the triangle, his little bit of the pyramid. And his boss only knows his little bit of the pyramid and the 10 guys that work underneath him. And it's like in any organisation or anything, we only know what we need to know.
It's called compartmentalisation, isn't it?
There we go.
And that's how many major projects and government departments work as well. Definitely, absolutely, yeah.
Let's try and finish on a positive. So I just want to read this comment out from Topaz. One world government, if by tracking people's thoughts, actions, we can change behaviour to our advantage, hence one world government. My view of one world government is, if a one world government has got a one world army, the only reason for the army being there is so that you get a size 12 across your throat and your chip switched off if you don't do as you're bloody well told. And people say to me, oh, that's ultimate Big Brother. Yeah, damn right it is. Have you not read 1984? Have you not looked out the front door recently? Have you not listened to Pippa King talking about smart cities and biometrics in schools? Have you not thought about the fact that they can switch your credit card off, and if you haven't got any cash, you're going hungry?
Yeah.
People say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, you haven't even thought about what that phrase really means. Because if I was a maniac who wanted to rule the world, I'd bloody conspire with my friends about it.
Yeah, and you'd hide the truth in something like the X-Files or something like Minority Report, so that anybody who actually believed that, other people would point their fingers and say, oh, you're a nutter, you believe, that make-believe stuff. Yeah. And that's what, if I was in charge of the powers that be and the world government, I would do that. You have to pay. So why would they not?
Yeah, let's get all these idiots running around earning money that we could actually just print ourselves without any debt. We could do that, but we don't. What we'll do, we'll have them all running around like idiots so that they've got to pay twice for gas, electric and water. We can con them all to thinking that they need to pay council tax. And, oh, by the way, we'll put them all in the smart city so that we can really keep an eye on them. And people say to me, you're a nutter. Well, I might be.
Well, do you know what? That's interesting, because I would have loved to have been in the room where the conversation went something like, well, do you know, I don't think we're going to get biometric ID cards in this decade. What are we going to do? I'll tell you what. Here's an idea. Let's put fingerprinting systems in schools so when the kids in 20 years' time don't even think about it, and then we've got it. They play the long game. The long game is played here.
Well, look at the ID card.
Yeah.
All that kind of got done and forgotten about and swept under the... Have you seen your driving licence recently? It looks pretty much like a bloody ID card to me.
Yeah, and soon, I don't know who was talking about it at the last general election, sort of saying, oh, you've got to have some photo ID to vote. That was being bandied around. Quite a lot of people don't. I've got friends that don't have driving licenses or passports because they don't want them. But suddenly, if you're not allowed to participate in society and vote anymore, you find yourself with some sort of, like you say, ID card. And the biometric photograph on your driving license and passport is used as a biometric and is used in airports to scan it. And they have sort of cardless gates or e-gates, don't they? It's airports where you don't even have to present your passport because they're referencing that database.
I won't. I mean, I've come back from America and all over, and when it says, oh, EU, and I will not go through those automated gates, which is another reason why I'm an ex, because my ex would sit and she'd go through the scanner, and then she'd, oh, yeah, you can scan this and read the RFID chip and be passport, and I'll go through the quick gate, and I'd stand there and go, no, I'm not getting in your scanner, mate. What? Yeah, but you've got to. No, I don't. No, I'm not getting in there. Oh, you might miss your flight. Don't worry, I've come 4 hours early. I'm fine. Right. And I used to, honestly, if my flight was due to leave at 12 noon, I would be at the airport at 6 in the morning. So that I was first in line to check my bag, get straight through into security. So if they wanted to threaten with delaying me so that I've got to panic and stuff, that doesn't matter to me, mate. I've got all day. I'm all right. Well, dinner time, pal. Carry on.
Do you know, it's interesting about these airport scanners, and I was only looking at this today, but London, part of these Smart City London thing, is that they have their first Internet of Things airport in the world globally. So London City Airport is a smart airport, and they have a blog on there. And there was one guy that wrote a blog post from March earlier this year talking about millimeter microwave scanners and how they've been banned in other parts of Europe, they've been banned in China because of the dangerous health effects of them.
Oh.
So yeah, I hadn't read it in detail, and I will go back to that and read it, because I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. We've got the Met Police and the Home Office using this technology on behalf of the public, and the public don't even know that they're being scanned. So I have a few friends in London, and I sort of sent them photographs of these scanners and said, look, if you see any of these anywhere, can you let me know? Because it means that sort of...
Another comment from Topaz, right on subject. He's just put, sorry, I'm assuming it's a he. That's terrible of me, isn't it, really? We only know what they want us to know, not necessarily what's actually true. And I think what they want us to know or want us to believe and what's actually true are sometimes miles apart. Absolutely miles apart. You know. And, I mean, I've had them at my door threatening me with things like, like the electoral register. Oh, you'll end up getting a fine. Oh, really? Who are they going to fine? Well, yeah, the occupier. I'm not an occupier. Goodbye. And just shut the door, I mean, I won't get called to jury service. I'm not on their stupid register, and don't intend to be. When they say, "Oh, you won't be able to participate in a election," great, fantastic. What we should do is just ignore them all out of existence. And if somebody asked me to describe myself, I would reluctantly use the word anarchist, because the word anarchy is misconstrued to mean violence but actually, what's just happened in London with the Grenfell Tower?
Yeah.
Anarchy happened that day because what happened is the government and the, let's call them the so-called authorities, nothing to house, feed or clothe any of those people. The local residents did it. That's anarchy. We don't need all of this rubbish. We just need people to be nice to each other and not be scared about what they want us to be scared of. What we should be scared of is smart cities, tracking devices, things they can switch on and off, a monetary system that's not for our convenience, and a health and social care that isn't.
It's interesting watching this technology come in, because this connectivity that's being pushed in the smart cities and sort of in our civil society is actually sort of coming back to bite them in the bum. Because we have things like Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got all sorts of different things.
We've got Raconteurs News.
You've got Raconteurs News.
Yeah.
It was because of social media, I suspect, the rallying of what happened at Grenfell Towers with the people sorting themselves out was because of that sort of connectivity.
Can you imagine if the miners had had a mobile phone? Could you imagine that for a moment? Even just a mobile phone?
And also as well, this sort of fake news and the mainstream media. I mean, I think BBC Newsnight, I read somewhere that it only has like 400,000 people watching on one viewing. That's appalling figures.
Yeah.
That's terrible. They must be shaking in their boots. They've lost the ability to manipulate. I haven't got a television. I know loads of people that have televisions. I don't sit and just sort of go into a stupor like I probably used to do years ago. When I think about it, I used to turn it on and that was it, me for the night. Not anymore. I'm proactive. I do stuff. I mean, I've got a big screen, but I'll watch YouTube stuff on it, and I might watch DVDs or whatever, or I might download something to watch, but it's certainly not connected to any TV network. Or because I'm visiting my customers in their homes, I see the odd bit, or I'll happen to be in somebody's car when the news is on or whatever, and I hear things. But the one that always gets me is on the BBC News, the government will today announce that. Well, if that doesn't mean that the BBC are the government's mouthpiece, then what the bloody hell does? Yeah, and I can remember growing up with only sort of 3 or 4 channels, and everybody sat down and watched the 6 o'clock news, and we all sat down and watched the 9 o'clock news. And when a terror atrocity happened from the IRA, then nobody knew about it until 9 o'clock that evening. Whereas now it's so much more alarming, because suddenly there's all these photographs and everybody's tweeting about it, and
they've got a drone flying over it, taking pictures, and
and the coverage is like nothing that anybody experienced 30, 40 years ago. And I was sort of trying to explain this to my kids, and said, we weren't particularly terrorised by that because it wasn't an immediate thing. We never saw quite of the aftermath or the story of it. We got a sanitised version to a certain extent, but it's really interesting trying to explain to my children who are in their sort of late teens, and they are connected to mobile phones. So I have to say they're both very privacy aware, sort of having known me for the past sort of 15 years doing what I'm doing. So they keep themselves on social media, which is good. Well, as far as I know, anyway. I mean, maybe they've got accounts that I can't see. Who knows? But anyway, they are tech savvy. In fact, my eldest is doing a computer science degree, and he is well aware of the privacy discussions that are going on there. And it's one of the universities where they have research, and so there's PhD students doing research, and he gets involved in that sort of aspect of things. Because he can see the plus side of the technology, but he can also see the other aspects like control.
Well, I was just going to say, you see like selfies and Instagram and what's that one where you can send somebody a picture, but in 10 seconds it's gone?
Oh, is it Vine? No, that's a 7-second thing, isn't
whatever they call it, yeah. And well, here's a picture of me, Mr. Facial Recognition System that the government own. You've just put your own. So now they've got your mobile phone number, they've got your email address, they've got where you are, they've got what you look like, and then you go into a crowd. On comes the millimeter microwave scanner. There you go.
Yeah, it's.
I'm just a conspiracy theorist.
No, but I think even with what we know now about sort of the connectivity of possibly hooking up the vast majority of the CCTV network into one real-time tracking surveillance camera network, you've got your millimeter microwave, you've got the end-to-end machine-to-machine wireless system all being set up for 5G, and the Internet of Things. I suppose at the moment I can choose how I interact with this. I mean, even to the point where I've still got a chip and PIN card. If my bank sends me a contactless payment card, I won't take it.
I don't. I cut mine up and send it back.
No, I do. Yes, I want another one. I want my old PIN number, because by the industry's own admission, those cards are less secure than a PIN number.
Well, they are.
You lose it.
There was a what was it on? It was on a YouTube channel, and a guy actually got a laptop bag, and he got his laptop, just like you can put in any old laptop bag, any old rucksack, and next to it was what looked like a power supply, but it wasn't. And the cables that came out of it weren't they were an aerial. And he sat in somewhere like a Costa Coffee or what's the other one? Starbucks. And he sat there for 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, he downloaded and got all the card details and all the account details of 400 and something people. That was people walking past, people walking through, and people getting drinks. Oh, and the staff.
That's called skimming.
Yeah.
When the biometric passport first came out, there's a chip in it that has our biometric details on fingerprint and photographs. Within a day, it had been skimmed and hacked. So what you can do is you can buy Faraday cage wallets. So you can buy wallets. Yeah. You can put those cards in your biometric passports into.
Or you can do what I do, which is just get a piece of tinfoil and wrap it around it and chuck it in the rucksack, because I'm a skinflint. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are ways around that, but people we were oblivious to the extent to which this technology reveals us.
I'll give you an example of money, cash. A day after the new £5 notes came into circulation, I was offered £1,000 worth of fakes for 250 quid by somebody I'd never met.
Wow.
I'd never met them, and he showed me one. And I held a fake before I held a real one. Because up until that point, I'd seen one, but I'd not handled one.
It's interesting, actually, because there are these systems are not, they're fallible. I was saying earlier on, if you had a fingerprint system in a school, you'd probably get one false negative or a false positive in 1,000. And that's by the admission. But there was one, I'm going to say it, and I don't care if the college wants to, but it was Impington College in Cambridge. one of the first colleges to implement fingerprint technology from a system called Very Cool, and which was they'd got the system from Guantanamo Bay, and
Called Very Cool.
well, yes, very cool.
That's not very difficult to sell to teenagers, is it?
It's not, is it? But within a few months of technology going in, kids had already hacked it.
Wow.
So
Oh, and the answer to the question in the chat room is, no, I didn't buy the fake fivers. No, I didn't buy the fake fivers. Yeah. But, I mean, if you just look at the contactless card that we were talking about, my view is that all they're doing, they're creating a problem so that they can later deal with it.
well,
Now, let's give you a contactless card. Oh, dear, we've just found out that they're not secure. What you need to do instead is have your fingerprint, your DNA, and a chip that's all linked together, and it's under your skin, so you won't have to worry about these contactless cards not being secure anymore.
well, do you know, it's really interesting about the contactless cards. Now, contactless cards work on what's called NFC, which is called connectivity.
Connectivity.
Yeah, and that is 13.56 megahertz. Now, I've got a website called RFID in Schools, because this is another talk, but anyway, there was a school in West Cheshire that decided it would be a good idea to tag 5,000 of their pupils with active RFID, which was transmitting a signal. So I was looking into this, and I wrote a paper, it's only 3 pages long, called 433 megahertz. Now, 13.56 megahertz, if you times it by, let me get to the last page here, because I feel, that's right, if you times it by, let's have a look, I think it's 33 or 32. I'll send you a link to this, and if you can put it in the chat room, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
It connects up with 433 megahertz, so it's sort of financially compatible with 433 megahertz. Is the radio frequency system that NATO and the United States Army uses to track all their personnel and big goods around the world, basically. So at ports and arterial routes and train stations and airports, they have 433 megahertz wireless sensors built into lampposts, so they can see where their military has been moved around. And all this happened after the first Gulf War. Apparently, the American military lost a huge equipment. Where that went, we don't know. But anyway, so they decided for the second, or the Iraq War, that they would employ Lockheed Martin to create this sensor network. So all these, we don't know where the sensors are because it's military, and obviously they don't want to dive into the sensors are. But these sensors, 433 megahertz, can be what you call a passive radio frequency or an active one. So if it's passive, it's picking up signals from an active transmitting device. And if it's active, then it's giving out signals.
Yeah, and searching for the answer, yeah.
So NFC, 13.56 megahertz, is a passive technology. So when we use our Oyster card, or when we use our bank cards, which is what it is, we're taking it to a scanner, and the scanner's activating the chip, and then as we walk away, the chip falls back asleep again. That's sorry. But with 433, it can be active. So because I've got it here, 13.56 multiplied by the number 32 is 433.92. 433.92 megahertz is the frequency of the global network, military network. So if we don't know where the scanners are, or those chips are, but if they are built into the infrastructure of major ports, it's potentially 433.92 megahertz. Those military-grade chips can activate our 13.56 near-field communication little cards in our wallet. So the 13.56 megahertz, the ones that we all carry around with us, can be activated by things other than scanners in shops. It can be activated by the global military network.
I mean, I'm just like you. When I'm due a new card, I actually ring them up a month before and say, do not send me a contactless card. And when they do, because they always do, I just cut it up and say to them, right, I'm just cutting this up. Can you now send me one without an RFID chip in it? And do you know what they say? Oh, what's one of those?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So the people dishing out the cards don't know what they are, but anyway.
I mean, the reason why I looked into the tracking technology of 433.92 megahertz was because, I don't know if you remember this, Aid, in 2012, there was a girl called Andrea Hernandez who got expelled from a school in San Antonio because she wouldn't take the RFID chip in her card. And it ended up a big court case. To cut a long story short, she lost. But the active chips that the kids were wearing around their necks was 433.92 megahertz. And the school was saying, well, of course, you can't, nobody's going to track the kids with this. And in actual fact, they were wearing the same military-grade Lockheed Martin technology around their necks that was being tagged on tanks and guns.
Oh, you mean round the neck, next to the heart and, and their organs, and next to the kid who has chosen not to wear one, but he's sat within 2 yards of, oh, my word.
So that's because at the same time, West Cheshire College were tagging kids with 6.35 to 6.75 gigahertz. So they were carrying active RFID chips around their necks in a lanyard. It was being emitted for up to 100 metres. That's 300 feet. That's the length of a football pitch. So 5,000 kids in West Cheshire, Blacon, around that area, were carrying these chips. And then, of course, these chips weren't being turned off when kids left school. They were taking them home and inflicting that frequency on the rest of the whole of that community. And so if you go to RFIDinschools.com, I specifically created a website for that because my other website is biometrics. Well, it's pippaking.blogspot.com, but that's all about biometrics in schools, and I didn't want to muddy the water with the RFID issue. So, but if you go to that website, it'll give you all the details of what went on there. But I don't want to say that I killed the project, but I bombarded the college with freedom of information requests wanting what consent they'd got from parents, children, the wider community, privacy impact assessments. And it had turned out that the college had this active RFID built into the system. And it was an ultra-wideband RFID. And if you remember, I was talking about ultra-wideband earlier. It was used for geophys. It can give a 3D. Yeah. So if you've got a single frequency, it gives you like a 2D, like a radar image. Mm-hmm. A splash of frequency, then you can start to give 3D positional places of where tags are, so first floor, third floor, the depth of it.
Right, okay.
But this particular technology that was being used in West Cheshire College hadn't yet got its ISO number or the IEEE number. It hadn't been accepted in the industry as a standard that it was commercial. So
testing it on kids.
We tested it on the kids in West Cheshire College. I got an article in The Guardian on it, and I chased the school mercilessly. The school spent over £1 million on this technology, our taxpayers' money, and they switched it off shortly after a journalist from one of the red top newspapers got in touch with them after I'd sort of bombarded the media, said, "You've got to do a story on this. This is outrageous. It's not happening anywhere else in Europe, let alone the United States, as far as I can tell." And so a journalist, I think, from The Sun had rung, I can't remember if it's Sun or Daily Mail, and had rung the school and arranged to go up and visit. And the school had said, "Oh, actually, we just switched it off last week." So there was no story there. So I pursued the school through the financial complaints. There's a committee in Parliament that looks at the misuse of public spending. And I basically made a complaint and said they've spent £1,000 of this taxpayers' money on a system that they've just switched off. They say doesn't really work. Of course, it blooming worked. It got its ISO and IEEE, which is the Institute for Electronical and Electrical Engineers, number while the kids were using it. And the guy of the company that supplied West Cheshire College with the technology was sat on the board that was working to get the technology passed for commercial use. Anyway, that in a 10-minute. But basically, if you go to RFIDinschools.com, you can see. And I had made complaint after complaint to the Information Commissioner's Office, who oversees the Freedom of Information Act, because the school weren't answering any questions about the technology at all. And in the end, the Information Commissioner just said to them, "You've got to give this girl the answers." And that's how I found out how much it cost. But I think the month after, it might have been the same month actually, the month after the principal decided to switch off the technology, she then decided to retire, and I think that was March, maybe 2013. And in the following January, she got an OBE honour from the Queen for outstanding educational contribution. You couldn't make it up, seriously. But anyway, I think probably because I was a bit of a pain in the arse and I got the media involved, that they decided it wasn't worth it and they switched it off.
Oh, God. Pippa, you've just mentioned a couple of the places where people can find. I mean, we've run well over the 2 hours, but it doesn't matter. We've got RFIDinschools.com. Now, there's an awful lot more to Pippa King than we can possibly cover in the 4 hours that you've joined us on Raconteurs Too, and the time that you spent with Andy and Jason on Raconteurs News as well. So we've got rfidinschools.com. Where else can people have a look at your work?
So my main website, which I started, I think, in 2005, is called pippaking.blogspot.com. But it is, if you type biometrics in schools, that's the title of the blog, which has got all the information about biometric technology in schools. If you want to know more about the sequester and radio frequency, radio physics stuff, the scanners there, that's on something called stateofsurveillance.blogspot.com. State of surveillance. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I do have a very unloved website, I have to say, which is called uksmartcities.org. And I have to say, I've not been on there for a long time. Obviously, I think you can understand how busy.
How on earth do you ever get time to teach anybody to play the piano?
Well, I think the nature of that job is that I sort of have to start when school's finish, and I finish around about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So I tend to get a full day at various stuff at some point. And I'm not sort of frantically at it, but it'd be nice to get paid for it. Don't be any money. That makes me feel better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes it's like you've said, it doesn't really matter who's listening to this. A lot of the time it's about cleansing our souls and getting this stuff off our chest.
I just, I had such an indignation of how wrong it was to fingerprint 6 and 7-year-old kids. And that never left me. That sort of spurred me on. It was just wrong. It was, against every gene in my body. And then to sort of do this sort of hidden surveillance and not be this lack of transparency and lack of discussion about the world we live in is concerns me. Not particularly for me, but for my kids and the next generation. It's nobody will know any different.
Well, it's not my point. That was Max Egan. I can't take credit for that. Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic point he made. And I'd really never considered that, but he was absolutely right.
No, he is. He's a great guy, Max. He hits the nail on the head, very much so. And again, if people want to go and listen to his recent podcast on 5G, that's really interesting. What's going on?
Anything else that you want to cover before we just remind people where they can get hold of Pippa?
Not particularly. I just wanted to make one point, really. And, I am very active, and I do spend a lot of time on this. It's not fair for me to say I don't, because I do. But I have to say, and I don't expect other people to do it to the same level I have, but really the only way and the reason I've been able to do it is because I had a fantastic husband who supported me at the time. And, while the kids were younger, he looked after them while I went down to London. And I always sort of try and stress people that you don't need particularly to be active, but if you can support somebody who is active in any sort of way, then that's okay. That's as good. And sometimes, me and my husband aren't together now, but we're still good friends. But he doesn't actually probably realise that one of the reasons the Protection and Freedoms Act went through was because of him, because he enabled me to do that. So there's many different ways that you can spread the word or just be helpful. Really, that's what I just wanted to say. So don't think you've got to be manic.
Just following on from that, we had Louise Castro on, who was incredibly active in fracking. The first time we had Lou on, she didn't want to use her real name, and I know you know Louise. And the second time she came on, her attitude was, "I'm past bloody caring because I'm sick of this." But her answer was, if all you do is write one letter rejecting or complaining about fracking, then you've done your bit. If you're an elderly couple and you can't even get out anymore, if all you do is write one letter, you've made a difference. And I think that's the thing. If you've got 10 people doing lots, or 1,000 people just doing a little tiny bit,
that's more effective, really.
Exactly, of course it is. So, Pippa, the one thing that I always say is, who's watching the watchers? And the answer is Pippa King, and people just like you. Because without you, it's not guidance that you're giving anybody, it's just information.
Yeah.
It's like you said, if one thing we do or say sparks one person into doing or saying something to somebody else, that's all we can ask. And that's why really we're here.
Yeah, and it's because of people like yourselves and Andy and Raconteur News that, you know, that you're, you know, to be useless if I was just sat in my house doing this by myself and nobody knew about it. So thank you, you know, very much.
No, thank you. I'm just going to wrap up, but if you could hang on to the call at the end, because there's a couple of things I just want to run through with you, Pippa. That'd be brilliant. Yep. So let's tell you what's happening on raconteursnews.com. Tomorrow night, that's Tuesday, we've got Jason Holmes, who'll be here 8 till 10 UK time with, and I've just got a big question mark because I'm not entirely sure who his guest is tomorrow night. I'll be here again next Monday, 7 till 9 UK time. And again, my guest, I've got 4 that I'm waiting for confirmation back with for dates at the moment, and hopefully one of those will have confirmed for next Monday. In the meantime, you can listen to all of the previous shows on raconteursnews.com. Just follow the link to the podcast. If you sat there listening,
I got a 6-pack of beers in my fridge and I'm really thirsty. I got a big bag of crisps and a full box of Quality Street. I got some microwave pizza and some microwave fries. Got some microwave hot dogs that have burst down the side. Got a big bar of chocolate and a big fat bag of weed. I got some money in my pocket in case I need to go and get me some more. I hear the postman knocking, but I can't be asked to answer the door. Because I answered yesterday, and the postman said to me, "Will you take this package, because there's no one in next door, you see?" And I said, "Yeah, I suppose I'll take it." Wankers. Some friends of mine are coming round to practice, because we're starting a band. This is our first rehearsal, and I know Rome wasn't built in a day. Yeah. So take your instruments in hand. We're starting off in G. Just let the music flow. Yeah, who knows, we could make history. Here we go, boys. Are you ready? Let's rock! 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Wow, that was like different, wasn't it? Tell you what, let's never do that ever again. Ever. Let's finish off with a farting competition. Loser skins up.